Okay, so good evening. I'm Dani Bartlett. I'm the Executive Director of Advocacy for the Coalition. And this evening, I'd like us to plant our feet firmly on the ground and think about the land that sustains us. I'm acknowledging as a settler from a long line of settlers, the land on which I sit is the traditional territory of Oneida Nations of the Thames, the people of the Standing Stones, locally the territory that are closest to me, and with the deepest respect I acknowledge, the Anishinaabe people, also referred to the Three Fire Confederacies, the Haudenosaunee people, also known as the Iroquois, the Lenape people, also referred to as the Delaware Munsee. And today, as the weather changes and we think about the transition from fall to winter, I think on the land on which I have the privilege to stand and think about the Dish with One Spoon Treaty and how I can personally work to ensure those principles of peace, peace, friendship, and respect. Today, we will talk about gender equality, and there is a world of wisdom to be learned from our Indigenous way of leading and decision-making. In the work to discover the truth, it is important to share that today in the province of Ontario, there are 127 First Nation communities, and 80 of them have a boil water advisory. The Nistongaga First Nation, which is in the northern part of our province, is on day 9,087 of their boil water advisory. This is well over 20 years old. And as the days go on, we count day after day. This summer, all of the political leaders had gone and visited and pledged that they were going to end this, but yet, shamefully, the count continues to rise. Today, there are over 6,500 bodies of Indigenous children that were found on only 20 of the 139 residential schools across Canada. And locally, those that have the power to do so have yet to do the right thing, in spite of calls from all three chiefs to begin the search at Mount Elgin Residential School. And this is also shameful. We are dedicated to the work of understanding and unpacking a long-standing history that had brought us to reside on these Indigenous lands. It is a long history of broken promises, miseducation, and not listening. We, as a coalition, are committed to the truth and reconciliation with our Indigenous neighbors, friends, and community partners. I acknowledge the many long-standing treaties, relationships between our Indigenous nations and Canada, and we recognize that individually and collectively, we all have a role in demanding that the treaties are honored or the land goes back. It is my opinion that after years of inaction, dirty water, and missing daughters, and broken promises, that the federal government needs to recompense the people of Turtle Island. Today is an opportunity to learn, reflect, and connect to the earth, to the First Nations community in our area, and to truth, stories, and learning. And it is my hope that we all spend some time with intentional reflection and then action. Welcome.
Thank you, Dani. And I'm just going to share my screen right now. I have a couple of things to say. My name's Linda Davis, and I am also Executive Director for the Coalition. So let me just start this. And I just want to start by saying thank you very much for attending this evening. I think we're going to have a really wonderful talk. So the Gender Equality Coalition of Ontario was started by the Canadian Federation of University Women and funding from Wage Canada. Our vision of the coalition is to use the collective voice and to create a community where everyone enjoys the opportunities, responsibilities, and the rewards, especially the rewards, equally, unrestricted by gender identity. And we have events coming up, which I'll talk about at the end of the events today. And I just want to acknowledge our moderator at this time is Jeanette Novak. And Jeanette is from the other London, she says, London, England. You'll hear it right away in her accent. She's made her way to Canada over 20 years ago. She's a group benefits and insurance advisor by day and a fitness instructor. And if you could see her in the flesh, you'd know she has to be a fitness instructor. She just looks so fit. So she's a fitness instructor in her free time. So she likes helping people. It's been her passion since she can remember. Being a mom of two amazing humans, Jeanette says, is her other passion. And she's passionate about ensuring that they experience equality and equity in all aspects of their lives. As a member of the Gender Equality Coalition of Ontario, she has the opportunity to take a deeper dive into the issues and the challenges that we face in our region around gender equality. And she's very eager to get her boots dirty. So at this time, I turn it over to Jeanette, your moderator for the evening. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So without further ado, I am going to introduce our panelists today so that you can learn a little bit about them, and then we'll get into our first question. So we'll start with Jordan Ward. Jordan studied chemical engineering at McMaster University, graduating in 2014. She currently works as a lead application engineer for Suez Water Technologies and Solutions in their municipal water division. Jordan lives in Cambridge, Ontario with her wife, 2 children, and their dog Fable. She enjoys camping, cooking, and board games and sports, and loves talking about beer, coffee, and pizza. So welcome to you, Jordan. And now we have Tea-Lynn Van Dijk. And Taya is a 37-year-old trans woman living in Norfolk County. She grew up in the Belleville area, attending Loyalist College, where she then worked in radio broadcasting for 12 years. During that time, she overcame her own fears and self-hatred, taking off her conservative upbringing to be who she was meant to be. She went from somebody who literally preached hellfire on the street corners to a staunch and firm ally of LGBTQIA2S community. Finally, to becoming a member of, after some very hard exploration of herself and personhood, she began the transition at age 35. Her marriage of nearly 14 years has not only survived, but thrived, with her wife, Gabrielle, being her biggest supporter and best friend. They have 2 wonderfully supportive daughters, Aria and Adelaide, and share joint Instagram account to share their story. So I highly encourage you to go check that out. And lastly, we have, but certainly not least, Terri McDowell. Terri is the Tax Managing Partner, Financial Services Canada. In the International Tax and Transaction Service Group of Ernst & Young. Terri is the advisor to a number of global companies, has served on the council of the Chartered Accountants Board of Examiners and numerous associations. Terri has been a faculty member for a number of professional development courses, has authored a number of tax policies and position papers, and is a frequent speaker at professional events. Terri was a 2021 panelist regarding the UN's standards on anti-discrimination in conjunction with the World Economic Forum. So welcome, everybody. I will go in no particular order. So I'm just going to ask Jordan to start, if you will, and just tell us what gender justice means to you.
Hi, so gender justice is actually a term I hadn't heard until I joined this panel. And doing a little bit of research into it, I found it's more or less synonymous with gender equity, which is a term I'm more familiar with. So to me, gender equity or gender justice is something, not equality. So there's a difference between equity and equality. Equality would be treating everybody the same. So everyone gets the same pair of boots, the same size. That's equality. Equity is taking into account people's backgrounds, their differences, their specific needs that affect them in their daily lives. So their experiences, for example, come into account. So to me, gender equity is propping up people who may be at a disadvantage, whether it's, gender is the big one. Of course, race, background, place of birth is certainly in our modern era a big part of experience. So to me, it's making sure that everybody has equity in their lives.
Awesome. Thank you, Jordan. Let's go to Tea-Lynn. Taya, what does equity, gender justice mean to you?
I totally didn't research it. I didn't think it was a term. I thought it was, anyway. For me, I would say it's freedom, right? Gender justice is freedom from assumptions, from roles, from pigeonholes, from expectations, societal limitations, and narrow thinking, from hierarchies and like this odd that we're so clinging to this strict toxic adherence to this binary way of thinking when we think of gender. And yet at the same time, also the freedom to embrace what you feel is feminine and what is masculine, right? Femininity and masculinity aren't necessarily bad things, right? It's the freedom to express those things and to live how you are without sitting in your car having a panic attack because the first time you wore a skirt or a binder in public. For me personally, I felt injustice in the pressure, the fear, the self-hatred I harbored because I wasn't fitting in with the image of the gender I was told I was. And for so many trans people, these feelings lead down some very dark roads of depression or self-harm or so much worse. And I thought that I was broken human garbage, right? I literally said those words to my therapist. And why? Why would I think something like that? Because I wasn't who I was told I was supposed to be, and I couldn't fix it. You can't fix it by pushing it down. So my suppression of self was the injustice. And it wasn't until I finally put up a fight that I saw that I wasn't the problem, right? We're not the problem. I just wanted to be me, and I wasn't allowing myself to do that. So for me, gender justice is being and embracing who you are and standing tall against standing tall against expectations, shrugging off like that societal baggage and just unapologetically being you.
Yeah, beautiful. Absolutely. Terri.
Took me a minute to get off mute there, so there we have it. So yeah, for me, it's maybe a little different tact at this stage of my life. I think first off, being Canadian, living where we do, I actually think it comes with a lot of privilege. We do live in a pretty forward-thinking society compared to a lot of the world. And for that, I'm very thankful and very grateful. So, I don't think a day goes by that I don't kind of look in the mirror and think, it's a good place to be. But on the concept of gender justice, I might build a little bit on the concepts of equity and equality that Jordan alluded to. I do think equal access is something that matters very highly. Whether you're talking, the binary gender community, whether you're talking non-binary, whether you're talking the trans community, I just think equal access to the playing field, if you will. And those playing fields are pretty wide. You're talking the shop floor, you're talking the classroom, you're talking the boardroom, and just opening those doors and having those doors open to all who are qualified to walk through, I think is, to me, a big step towards gender justice as a whole. So maybe leave it at that, Jeanette.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah. Taya, I love what you had to say about this. I am a mother of a transgender daughter, and for me, just allowing her to be authentic, because when she stepped into her authentic self, amazing things happened for her. And we need to allow amazing things to happen to all human beings, regardless of whether they're trans or gay or black or white, you know. So yeah, authenticity, most definitely. Let's move on to the next question. I'll direct this to Taya first, if that's okay. So you all get a turn at going first. Gender exclusionism is on the rise. And we want to know, have you had any experiences with being excluded or discriminated against?
Okay, so I felt really bad about this question because I'm not gonna lie, I've had it really relatively easy in this department. Maybe hormones have been nicer to me than I thought they have, or maybe I just happen to live in a really, really wonderful, nice part of Canada. Terri had mentioned we're really lucky to live here, and by gosh, we sure are. And maybe I've miraculously somehow surrounded myself with the right people and family, or maybe a combination of those. But I've only ever really been directly excluded or discriminated against, I think, for being trans once, really one time. I mean, I think every trans person knows the pain and feeling of misgendering. That sucks. It's really humiliating and it's degrading. And I have literally bawled my eyes out for like 45 minutes straight because of one person who did it totally accidentally. And it happens. But one time I had a family member who posted some TERF rhetoric on their Facebook page, saying trans women made womanhood hard or worse for cis women. And I had asked her how I did that. I said, what have I done personally that had lessened or ruined her life as a woman? And she had no answer, of course, because there is no answer to that, because I haven't done anything. But her mother, another family member, chipped in to say, and she said, well, if you don't know, you're not a woman. I don't know what to tell you. And I responded angrily. And then suddenly I was the bad person, and there's a lot of back and forth. But, as I read and reread what was said to me, I realized that something to me that was really eye-opening, that I don't need these people in my life, right? Like, they were family, and it hurt. It hurts to hear people you love or who you think love you say these things. But it was like holding a hot coal because someone said you had to, right? Why am I holding this? It hurts. So I let it go. Block, I'm done. I think Glennon Doyle called it protecting her island. Love Glennon, by the way, right? And, for some people that's easy. And for some people it's really, really hard, right? I'm not saying it's easy to let go. It's difficult, right? But that is a trigger that I'm always going to pull, right? I carried far too much self-hatred for far too long to let anyone, family or not, pull me down, girls. I don't stand. I sit. I don't sit, I stand. That sounded more dramatic in my head, but whatever.
That's awesome. Thanks, Taya. Terri, you want the question again? Are you good?
No, I'm fine. Thanks, Jeanette. Yeah, a lot of what you said, Taya, I totally, I think most trans people have experienced that in some way or another. I'd have to get personal in terms of answering this question. I've known my entire life that I was trans. I didn't necessarily know the language or know the words to it, but I've always known in one way or another. But as I really came to grips with it in my adult years, I'm in my 50s. This was some, 30 plus years ago that we were, starting to have discussions, or I was starting to have discussions. And at the time, I'd maybe go to the workplace again. I had friends who were trans, and if you go back to the 1980s when I was really starting my working career, it was pretty uncommon for people to transition in the workplace. So your question around exclusion, I think that takes many forms. And I think about people at that point in time who the term always was, they would go stealth was the word. So they would, basically lose their prior existence as much as they could. And that often meant losing family and losing friends and giving up on promising careers and transitioning. And coming out the other side. I didn't take that route, frankly. I came out to friends, I came out to family, I came out in personal relationships, but I played the middle ground for a very long time in my work career for a number of reasons. Frankly, you know, if that going stealth, and it certainly worked for some people, I just don't think it's possible anymore. We're in the digital age. Anybody wants to find out personal history, they're going to find it. I mean, the age of the internet, the age of the digital highway, call it what you will. It's there. So if it was ever possible, I don't believe it's possible now. And in a way, thank God, like people should not have to go through that kind of exclusionism and that kind of, I need to run and hide to be myself. And so that's a very long-winded, maybe convoluted answer to a specific question. But to me, that's a form of exclusionism at its very core, just forcing people to do things that are a little bit inhumane, to be honest. So, I'll leave it at that. So thank you.
Thanks, Terri. Jordan.
I just want to start off by saying that you can be related to people, you can share genes, you can share blood with people, but that doesn't mean they're your family, right? So that's an important thing to keep in mind. And that doesn't just go for trans people, that's everybody in general. Yeah, I think this last year has been difficult. Certainly when I realized I was transgender, Donald Trump had just come into power in the United States, and that changed the discussion around women's rights, LGBT rights, Indigenous rights, all sorts of things. And it was terrifying, frankly. And I actually spent the better part of 3 years not living publicly, not being myself. My trans identity was very personal to me, and kind of navigating this world where everything was very, it seemed chaotic. There was no control. There was ridiculous amounts of misinformation. And I think things got a little bit better for a brief amount of time, but then I look at, you know, what's going on over in the UK and what's happening in Hungary and what's happening in Poland. And I work for an international organization. I have colleagues that live in these countries and they're discriminated against. And I mean, the discussions, particularly around like what's been broadcast on the BBC recently. I think it was 2 weeks ago, the CBC was running a few articles about, you know, gender critical, I don't even know what to call it. It's not science or anything based in reality, but, you know, there are people out there that do wish harm on the trans community, on the gender non-conforming community, on the two-spirit community. And it's difficult to live with that kind of weight lingering. I am very fortunate that I have not felt outright discriminated against, occasionally misgendering, people mixing up on pronouns and things like that. But for the most part, you can shrug that kind of thing off. I'd say the only time I felt, and I wouldn't call it necessarily discrimination, but more ill-informed or ignorant, is actually from the medical community. And, you know, trying to find a doctor who is willing to prescribe me HRT, trying to find a therapist who I could talk to about gender identity. You know, I spent a year finding the assistance that I needed to start my medical transition. And even now, you know, trying to get referrals, trying to schedule surgeries and things like that. It's the lists are endless. You know, I refresh my email multiple times a day, hoping that like maybe I'll get an update on something, and it's just, it is what it is. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of professional people out there who are willing to accommodate the trans and gender non-conforming community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my daughter and I had a conversation not too many days ago about, you know, her experience, and we were just driving in the car, and she actually said, you know, I'm very lucky because I haven't experienced, as you were saying, Tea-Lynn, she hasn't experienced any discrimination. And, you know, she's 17, and I think that she is very fortunate to, to be in this age group that is very open and accepting, but that isn't the case for older age groups, and so it's very tough. Now, that's not to say as a mother I'm still not terrified that I've been able to cocoon her and keep her safe, and next year she's going off to university and she'll be in the big wide world, and who knows what's going to happen. And so it's terrifying as a mother, as much as she hasn't experienced anything yet. It's a scary thought to know that she's going to be out there. Jordan, I have some resources if I could help you with any of the people that you need to connect with. So we should chat. Okay, let's go on to the next question. So let's start with Terri this time, if that's okay. Why do you think trans people are excluded from discussions about gender equality?
Yeah, I think there's a whole range of answers to that, to be honest, or possible answers to that. I'll take the more generous view to start with and suggest, I think awareness. I think there's a large part of society who even today, 2021, don't really understand the transgender community. They haven't knowingly been exposed to it. They haven't had cause to necessarily look that deeply into it. And so I do think it's awareness. And thank God for panels like this and people that dial into things like this. I mean, I think this type of visibility, this type of communication, the broader, the wider, the more common it becomes, I think it just goes a long ways towards helping eliminate those barriers. I think, people get very scared by what they don't know, what they can't see, what they haven't experienced. And so the more commonplace it becomes, the more mainstream we become, the more people see the reality of transgender existence. I think those barriers come down a lot more quickly. So that's the generous answer, as I say. I mean, there is no doubt that it stirs a lot of harsh feelings among a prejudiced proportion of society. I like to think that proportion is becoming increasingly a minority. It's more vocal, but that's usually a case of desperation. People start to get to their last gasps, and the bangs on the drum become louder, kind of thing. So we're definitely going through that right now. Jordan and Taya both mentioned some of the examples, looking at what happened in the UK, looking at somebody like an institution like the BBC publishing what they did. It's beyond belief in some quarters. But then I look south of the border, and there is over 100 anti-trans bills that are going through at this moment on a whole range of issues. And I'm sorry, I'm rambling a little bit here, but the most infuriating for me was the MSNBC interview with the governor of, I believe it was West Virginia. And he had just signed an anti-trans bill, and the reporter asked him how many constituents in his jurisdiction were affected by this. And he was a complete deer in the headlights with the answer of, well, none that I know of. Yeah. Then why are you signing this bill? Like, okay, I'm sorry, I'm a tax advisor. Why are we paying your salary to spend money on things that are pure hate? So, it starts with the general population. It starts with the grassroots. It starts with the voting population, and it spills from there. Is truly my perhaps naive belief, but I think I actually am an optimist. I think we're well on our way, and I think awareness is the key. So,
awesome. Thanks, Terri. Jordan.
I'm going to be less generous than Terri. I believe trans people are excluded from the conversation because of power structures that we have in our society. There are certainly people, it tends to be heterosexual, cisgendered white men who have reigned on top of society for forever, human existence, and unfortunately, when push comes to shove, when those power structures are challenged, the easiest thing to do is to exclude the people that are affected. So why would you want to hear the voices of a trans individual who has experienced life as a man and as a woman, or as all genders or no genders, because that subverts the narrative that the power structures are built upon. So, you know, it applies, I mean, not just to gender, but I think about what's been going on recently in Canada, particularly. We mentioned at the start about access to clean water and things like that. We don't include Indigenous communities into those conversations because somebody benefits. There are people at the top that benefit monetarily, through power, through commerce, and it's difficult for those people to listen to diverse voices because you know, it kind of proves that the narrative that they're trying to push is not the equal one.
Mm-hmm. Tea-Lynn.
Well, we had like the nice answer, which is like, oh, they don't really know about us. And then the obviously other serious answer, which is they want to keep the power they hold on to. So I'm going to take a bit of a different answer. If I'm approaching the people who know about us, who know we exist, and at the same time have the ability to hear us, I would say, especially like, you know, when we talk about turfs, triggers, and like bigots and like transphobes and stuff, I think it's because they see us as failures in one and like too new in another, right? Like I lived for 35 years as a man, but I'm disqualified because I'm not a man, and because I was a failure as living as one, right? Didn't make it. You know, I've been on hormones for 19 months and I've been out publicly for over a year, but I don't know what it's like growing up as a young girl in school, or to be a 20-something woman navigating out being on my own for the first time, right? I'm still going through puberty 2.0, right? So they see our failure as one gender and our inexperience as another as a reason to leave us out. But what I think stances like that are missing is that trans people really tend to see these problems a lot clearer, I think, than others, because we have fought against our birth gender and we fight to be who we are now, right? I know how damaging toxic masculinity is because I wore it as a cloak and a mask for so long, and I see the issues surrounding lack of men's mental health support because I had to push through the stigma of even needing and getting help to get to where I am today, right? And I see the problems of reducing women to walking incubators, right? And being reduced to the sum of their biological parts because I have gone through so much imposter syndrome. It's ridiculous to be able to stand tall and say that I am a woman, despite not having those parts myself. Because feminism isn't about what parts you have, right? It's about personal and bodily autonomy. And, you know, on that note, you don't think trans people are passionate about a person's right to bodily autonomy? I mean, look at like what Jordan has just said, right? Like how hard it is to get access to these things. So many of us have had to fight tooth and nail for the teeniest bit of hormone, or to jump through stupid amount of hoops to get approvals for surgeries and wait lists. And we live bodily autonomy, right? We live and breathe it because that is entirely what we're doing. I stand firmly by a woman's right to choose to get that hysterectomy at age 24 if they want it, for a young man to get vasectomy if he chooses, right? Because that is bodily autonomy. And I stand here loud and tall and in large part because of my trans experience, not in spite of it.
Mm-hmm. You think their power is challenged? Do you think if more transgender people came to the table, that would make them have to acknowledge that we all exist as human beings? That's basically, they would have to acknowledge that. That's a problem, right? So Jordan, let's start with you for this one. If you could inform the general population, what is the one thing that you would tell them about transgender issues or trans people?
This isn't a performance. This is me. This is my identity, right? Nothing I am doing, I'm not acting like a woman. I acted like a man for a significant portion of my life. What I'm doing now, this isn't a performance. This is me. I go about my day-to-day life. I take care of my children. I go to work. I pay my taxes. I go vote in elections. I do the same thing that every other Canadian, any other person on this planet, because they have the ability to. I do that. And this idea that I don't know, I'm doing this for attention, that this is some sort of sexual deviance. No, this is just what felt right to me. I am more of myself than I've ever been. And, maybe that's good or bad, depending on how much you liked me prior to my transition. But there's nothing performative about my identity. I'm just trying to go about living my life. So when I get questioned about, oh, Jordan's a woman now, like, well, no, like I've always been a woman. I was raised and socialized as a man. Yeah, my body parts maybe don't align with that of a cis woman. I was affected by, I guess, a male puberty, but I'm kind of reclaiming that now. I'm reclaiming myself, my body, and my identity, and I'm living loud and proud. So if there's anything performative, it's me raising my voice, getting excited about this because I am passionate about it. But yeah, there's no performance in my identity.
Yeah, awesome. Tea-Lynn.
There we go. I'm a little annoyed because Jordan totally stole my answer. But yeah, I totally agree. There is no ulterior motive to me transitioning, right? People don't get that, right? Jordan nailed it. She nailed it on the head, right? I have no reason to transition beyond wanting to be myself and to be happy. That's it. That's it. I don't understand why that's so hard to grasp. I'm not out to trick men, mostly because I'm not interested in men at all. But, I'm not out to trick lesbians either, right? Because one, I'm married to a partner who makes my heart sing in bursts of joy every single day that I'm with her. But two, because I have never, ever met a trans person, any trans person ever, who wants to sleep with someone who's a bigot and a transphobe, right? If you want to talk about disclosure, I want you to disclose if you're a transphobe first, please, right? And, I'm not trying to win at sports, right? Because I have the athleticism of a sloth with a hernia, right? None of these things are why I've transitioned, right? There's only one upside to transition, which I think people seem to forget. There's only one upside, and that's being happy as myself. That's the one upside. That's it. The potential downsides are numerous. You get loss of friends, loss of family, your spouse, your kids, your job, the place where you live, the prospects to get any of those things back again or in any meaningful capacity. You open the floodgates of mental, emotional, physical, sexual abuse, right? And you can multiply all of that if you're a trans person of color who has it so much harder than I could possibly imagine, right? You have everything to lose by transitioning. Everything to lose. And I have met far too many trans people who have lost everything. And it absolutely breaks my heart. I have been extremely fortunate. And I recognize that I'm speaking from a place of immense privilege. My wife stayed, my kids love me, my family supports me, my friends support me, my job was supportive. But I thought when I came out that I would lose them all. I thought I'd be living homeless and alone, worst case scenario, honestly. And I still put it on the line. Why would I do that? Right? To trick someone who hates me into having sex? To win a trophy? Right? To watch some cranky lady in a Michael's bathroom pee? Right? I did it for me. Right? I did it for myself. And I'd risk it again. Because I could never go back to how I was before.
Terri.
Really hard to follow. Really hard to follow both. But I think I'll just try to amplify that. I think there's a number of things I point to. I use a phrase sometimes, and sometimes, frankly, it gets me into trouble with some of my friends. But I really think the idea of normalizing transgender existence is really important. I think just understanding that, as Jordan said, as Taya said, we're just ourselves. You know, there's no performance here. There's no ulterior motive. We're just trying to live our best lives through our true, authentic selves. And so for me, that means leading whatever a normal existence means as myself. And I happen to be transgender. You know, I happen to be a lot of things. One of them is I happen to be a transgender woman. So that's a big part of it for me. And lost my train of thought a little bit, but you know, one of the jokes that often gets made by my friends about me as they get to know me is I'm pretty boring. And you know, they say you're basically a soccer mom without the kids or the minivan. And you know, that for me is almost the biggest compliment you can give me. Like that's you know, that's what I strive for, kind of thing, is just to be myself. And a dear friend of mine, you know, transitioned in a professional environment in her 30s, and we're friends to this day. And she explained to me, she said, when I finally made the leap to be fully authentic in all parts of my life, what I didn't appreciate was it also made me a better lawyer in her case. And I thought, good for you, you know, that was your experience, and you know, happy for you, etc. But I didn't really understand what she meant until I took the leap myself. And I hesitate to say that I'm better at my job. I'm definitely happier at my job. And that by itself is incredibly powerful for me. So that's my own experience, obviously. But I do think this idea of moving us out of the tabloids and moving us into the mainstream has come a long ways to go for sure. But that's really, really critically important. So.
Yeah. Well, you know, I can tell you that as a mom, you know, my daughter came out at 12 years old. What child would put herself in a position to experience so much hardship? You know, what child would do that? But as her mom, she was displaying this from a very young age. And so I don't want anybody to tell me, like you just did, Jordan, that this is performative. Because at 3 years old, when my daughter, my son at the time, wanted to wear princess dresses to Disney, that wasn't because she wanted attention or she wanted to perform. It's because she loved everything feminine. And, you know, and so, you know, I need people to know that transgender people are human beings, period. That's it. You're just human beings. So, yeah. Let's go. I think we have one more question, and I believe it's the last one. So take your time. What are things that everyday supporters can do to help trans people and help shine a light on tired and patently false stereotypes? So, Jordan, sorry.
I'm going to actually skip the stereotypes portion of this, and I'll say the thing that you can do immediately right now, as soon as you get off this call, is contact your member of provincial parliament and express support for Bill 17. Bill 17 was introduced a couple of weeks ago by Suze Morrison. This is called, sorry, I've got it on a separate screen here. This is the Gender Affirming Healthcare Advisory Committee Act of 2021. The purpose of this bill is basically to force the Ontario government to put together a coalition of MPPs to get them to do some research, to talk to the community, to talk to the medical professionals, and find out how the trans population in Ontario is affected, what their needs are, where things are lacking. And the point of this bill is entirely investigative. There's actually, other than, you know, we pay MPP salaries already out of our tax dollars, there's no additional money going towards this. But right now, this bill is actually sitting pretty stagnant in the legislature. It passed second reading, again, a couple of weeks ago. It's currently sitting with the Standing Committee of Social Policy, and it's literally sitting there. It's not on their agenda. Again, it's another thing that I check the OLA probably daily, just to see like what the updates are. And I think at this point in time, it really needs a push. So email your MPP, email Doug Ford, CC all the other party leaders, CC me, I'll buy you a beer. And please just express support for the trans community, because this bill might not end up going anywhere, but at least it'll expose the public to the trials and the experiences that trans people in this population go through. So if you want to make an immediate impact on the trans community in Ontario, support this bill.
And Linda posted a link in the chat. So if you're looking for the link to that bill, it's in the chat box right now. Let's move to Tea-Lynn.
That's awesome. I honestly didn't even realize. I feel like I'm so out of touch. I'm like the worst trans person ever, the worst trans activist, because I didn't even know the bills. Oh my word! But I will look into that. But if we're speaking a little more every day, definitely do what Jordan said, please, for the love of all things, do what Jordan said. But if we're talking a little more every day, and this is going to seem really, really, really basic, but speak, please speak. Trans voices are hoarse. We are hoarse with trying to gain basic human respect and dignity. Speak up, please. Raise your voice with ours. And every day, that can mean normalizing, having your pronouns on social media, your email signature or something. It's small and it seems so insignificant. Even a pin on your jacket. Like it can mean correcting people who misgender trans people, even awful bad trans people you don't like. If I ever meet a trans person who ends up being my arch nemesis and I hate them forever, I will still never misgender them, right? Because that's just the basics. Like that is the raw, simple, absolute bare bones basics of human dignity, is to treat us and expect other people to treat us with that respect, right? Consider who you vote for. As Jordan said, right? I don't want it to be, but this is political. For some reason, my existence is political and I don't want it to be. I want to just live, but it is. So please consider who you vote for, right? Is your candidate someone who advocates for trans rights or actively against them, right? Reads trans stories, read about our struggles. My mother-in-law, when I first came out, she bought like 4 different books, like all about like trans people coming out and their stories, just so she could read and understand where I was coming from, right? That meant a lot to me, and it still means a lot to me. And, is someone you love trans? Correct other people who misgender them, most especially when they're not there, right? Let that like a constant, and believe us. Please believe us when we say how like bad dysphoria is hitting us, right? Believe us when we tell you how much it hurts when people do misgender us, right? Believe us when we tell you that 2021 has been the most deadly year for trans people on record, especially for trans people of color, right? And that we need help, right? We need help for trans kids getting kicked out of their homes. We need help for trans adults who lost everything, like access to their children, right? We need better mental health support. We need everyday normal people to stand up and speak out on these issues through voting, through politics, right? Like Bill 17, please, right? And simply by treating us with dignity, right? And demanding that dignity from others around you, even when there's no trans person around you.
Fantastic. Thank you. Terri.
Yeah, thanks. I think I might sound incredibly general with this statement, but it's truly heartfelt. And I think this could be said about a lot of things, but obviously in kind of trans visibility and trans awareness, and that I think starts with like, see the person in front of you, see the person for the individual that they are. And when I say see the person, I mean really see them, like take the time to know who this person is as a person. And there's a thing that I go to a lot, that if you've met Terri, a transgender woman, you've met one transgender woman. Like we're not plug and play, we're not universal, we're still individuals. And getting to know us as individuals, getting to know us as human beings, and then make your judgment of, I like this person, I don't like this person, I want to know them. That's kind of fair too. I mean, we're all human beings, but just take the time to engage and try to check your preconceptions at the door and see the person in front of you and listen to that person. And there's this, I'm sure everybody on this call has heard the phrase unconscious bias before. It's so real. And, learning to check that there's conscious bias and there's unconscious bias. And, it's easy to say, I don't have biases. Sure you do. We all do. And learning how to kind of check those and really take the time to see the individual as the individual. And I just can't leave without kind of reinforcing what you said, Taya. I mean, Trans Day of Visibility, or Trans Day of Remembrance, pardon me, on Saturday. Stats can be manipulated, we all know that, etc. But the best stats that we've got is in North America, more than a death a week, a murder a week of trans individuals, and global stats, more than one a day. We're at 375 documented deaths of transgender individuals in 2021, and the year, of course, isn't over. So it's something that just has to be, looked at and resonate with any decent human being that's out there. And Saturday comes and goes. Don't just think about it on Saturday. This is happening every day somewhere in the world, and people need to pay attention to that. So very somber thought, but I think it needs to be said. And it's as we talk today, you can bet that somewhere in the world there's been a trans individual that has been murdered. That's so.
Yeah, it is sobering, that's for sure. I want to, in the chat, there's a few things, or just a couple of things. So Marilyn has said, I'd like to bring attention to the recent National Film Board documentary, Into the Light. Has anybody seen that? It tells of a mother and her young daughter's experience as the child identifies as a girl. It's very well done. I have not seen that. Anybody seen it? No. I can tell you that the one thing that my daughter watched, because it was literally the only thing on, a television channel that she could see, was I Am Jazz. And we started to watch that together. But towards the end of it, I was a little frustrated by it. I've got to admit, I was annoyed by the way it was just sensationalized. And I would rather have just seen it naturally play out without all of the drama and goodness knows what. But it was definitely something that helped, my daughter kind of, identify with somebody that was also trans. So I'm going to definitely check out Into the Light. Thank you, Marilyn, for bringing that. And I'm going to just read some other stuff. So phenomenal panel discussion. I was tired starting this, to be quite honest, but after a long day, but I was quickly awakened, engaged and captivated by what you ladies had to say and share. Thank you for sharing your thoughts, opinions and experiences